like doing these, you know. Um uh whole own new bullshit that has to do with YouTube for some reason not okay, that has this finally been fixed. Okay, I think that finally the YouTube issue is fixed. And I think that that was just, it just was unhappy. I think it was just unhappy. So, okay. Jesus fuck. I'm so tired of technology. That was so many issues that weren't even me being incompetent. It was just, is Mercury in retrograde? Help. Okay. Okay, can finally fucking start this. All right. Like I was saying, Pangchan. I know that this is a lot, and I will have a lot to say about it. That's what I know. Um, cool. Uh, yeah. Let's get to it.
네, 안녕하세요. 스트레이키즈의 방찬입니다.
옛날에 근데 그런 거 있었던 것 같아. 맏형이다. 나는 너네보다 형이야 이런 게 있었는데 지금 그냥 우린 이제 친구야 이런 느낌이지 이제.
많이 되게 편하게 해주고
이게 리더라고 뭐 꼭 뭐 애들을 뭐 시켜야 되거나 우리 이렇게 해야.
I continue to be really curious about where Pangchan learned like leadership from. I'm really deeply curious about like, did he learn his style of leadership from like trying and failing and having a hard time himself? Or did he learn his style of leadership by watching people who were really good leaders? Or did he learn his style of leadership by experiencing really poor leadership and trying to like change or manage that, right? And because his style of leadership is very different from like what we typically see in very hierarchical leadership styles, which is not to say like, I mean, I think that like a lot of leaders, they like to think and believe that like they're just pals or just friends or whatever with their the people they're leading, and it usually is not nearly as true and accurate as they want to believe that it is. I think that's a good point, Kat, that like, yeah, Chan's dad did used to be a swim coach, and like maybe there's like some amount of relevance there. And seeing some of that coaching, but I mean, he also used to be a harsher leader, so I mean, it could be that he got some advice as he continued to be a leader. But yeah, I'm curious, and I'm curious about like, it could also be that he very intentionally like went out and learned things about being about leadership and different leadership perspectives, because I mean, it's not a difficult thing to find content on, especially written in English. Like, I don't know what types of what the common leadership books and such written in Korean are, or what that mentality tends to be. I don't have that, but I certainly know plenty about the types of resources there are in English, and there's a lot. There's a lot. And so, I generally am very curious how much of this was picked up from somewhere, how much of this was learned through trial and error, how much of this was purposeful education, how much of this is trying to push back against things that he didn't like. And that's something I'll probably never know the answer to, but it's something I might actually like. That's one of those questions that it's very possible that at some point he talks about that, or somebody asks about that, like where he got his theoretical model of how leadership works best. So that's definitely a question that I'm often on the lookout for during interviews and things like that.
합시다 뭐 굳이 이럴 필요는 없잖아요. 전 듣는 리더가 되고 싶지 뭘 주도하는 리더는 되고 싶지는 않은 것 같아요. 최대한 멤버들이 믿을 수 있는 기둥이 될 수 있는 그런 존재가 되고 싶고, 애들이 생각하는 거, 애들이 하고 싶은 거 이런 거 다 리스펙하고 존중하는 게 그런 배려들이 맞다고 생각해서 할 말을 해야 될 때가 아닌 이상 최대한 뭐 그냥 터치 안 하려고 하는 것 같아요.
우리한테 친구
This is what we in the biz refer to sort of as the servant leadership model. The theory essentially is that the best leaders are those who they are there to support, stabilize, and sort of report to the people they're in charge of, right? That we have, yes, this theoretical hierarchical model, but the theoretical hierarchical model does not mean that I am actually more knowledgeable than you, that I actually know more than you, that I actually have significantly better insight than you do. It simply means that I am in this position of some type of management, and that the people sort of, as we say, what we would say is on the ground doing the work is very often that statement, are the ones who are going to have the best understanding of the work that they are doing, right? This is also sometimes referred to as like leading from behind. So that's another way that it gets referred to, that like you're not in front of people, you're not making them follow you, but you're trying to help guide them from behind them. You're sort of like keeping an eye on them and trying to help guide them in a helpful direction, but they're still in some ways the ones leading. So that's another way it gets referred to. Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into that, and it's a lot more than just like treating people like they're friends. It's a lot more than just acting like, people are fine and cool. Like it is a leadership method that does take practice and effort, which I think is part of why like he does, just based on the things he said, like he does still struggle with it, and he is very young, right? He's a very young leader, And he, yes, has a lot of experience in that leadership from a young age, but I think a lot of leaders were some type of leadership when they were teenagers, as well, and it's still very young. It takes a lot of time and effort and practice and like deep study to really understand how to be a really effective leader from like an action oriented standpoint. Yeah, so that's how we would refer to these things. That's I guess my point.
처럼 되게 편하게 해주는데 뭔가 일적인 거나 저희를 챙겨야 되는 부분이 있으면 이제 딱 리더가 되는 거죠.
리더로서 딱 내가 뒤에서 지킨다 이거.
그래서 나 진짜 웃겼던 게 이제 비행기 내리잖아. 근데 이제 찬이 형이랑 나랑 옆에 있었어. 이제 이렇게 가방 싸우고 내리잖아. 난 당연히 찬이 형 먼저 가게 해줬지. 안 가는 거야. 이렇게 가고 있어. 형 가야 되죠. 내가 먼저 가야 되는 거구나 이러고 약간 갔었어.
포지션이 항상 뒤에 있죠. 강박이자 습관.
Yeah, so this is like something, I mean, I think that we all talk about this with Chan like quite a bit. He literally does do a lot of like leading from behind. Like he has taken that concept extremely literally. God bless him. He's really and part of it is because he wants to literally watch over all of them, right? He wants to literally keep an eye on them. It's a little bit of a control issue, and he's admitted to that like he wants to know where they are as much as possible. He wants to make sure that nobody's getting left behind. He wants to make sure nobody's getting hurt where he can't like see them, things like that. You know, he takes a certain type of leadership role. I think I've mentioned this before that Chan is not the only leader in the group. It's just that he takes leadership responsibilities for certain types of things. Changbin is a leader in his own right. You know, that sort of like that emotional core of Skiz thing is its own leadership skill. And what Chan is doing is taking leadership responsibility for like almost existential levels, right? Are they safe? Are there, you know, is everybody's like physical bodies okay? Do I know where they are? Do I know they're alive? Do I know that, like, you know, trying to be that mediator between the company and the group, that's a really bad place for him to be in. That's a lot of conflict of interest there. I'm sure we'll get into that. But that like level of leadership that's very much about that, yeah, kind of existential, not in a philosophical, but in a more literal sense, level of safety and stability. You know, as well, of course, like music-wise, there's his level of production. You know, there's leadership aspects there. The technical leadership and the personnel leadership are two different types of leadership, and this is really important when we think about leadership overall. Is that skill-based leadership is different from people leadership. People management and product management, or skill management or technical management, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. Some people will refer to it as soft skills and hard skills, which I have deep fundamental personal hatred of, that I will not get into. But, you know, those two different, those are two very, very, very different things that require very different types of leadership and capacity. So what he's taking in the people management is sort of this like existential health, safety, functionality, making the group work. And then he takes a lot of that technical leadership as well. ad starts in 1 second. So there's an ad going on Twitch, which means that I should advertise things I'm doing and recommend that you watch my. You're already watching this. I just assume that if people are watching this, they're subscribed. But I think that's an incorrect assumption. Other things I'm doing, I'm very excited. I did just send out, I need to repost it. And I need to post it on the Discord, but if you're on either my threads or my Discord, I suppose I should post it on YouTube as well. I am going to start a series of live play, like live actual play games based on Skizlore. So whether players end up wanting to play as Stray Kids or as like just people in the lore, I have a questionnaire of skill experience because total newbies are totally allowed. Skill experience, kind of like what people are looking for, what genres they want to play in, what times they're available, things like that. For people who might be interested in doing some type of actual play, live play, tabletop RPG game, what we'll do is we'll bounce between several systems depending on what the group is interested in. So D&D might come up, but D&D, honestly, not like a great system for total beginners, in my opinion. Also not a great system for things that are like new and short. I don't know. I love D&D, but it could be much better systems for various things we want to do. So we'll bounce between various systems. I have that form to fill out. If you already know where it is and you want to fill it out, go for it. I will also I'll repost it on Threads. I'll post it in the Discord, and I will post it on YouTube. And so if you want to play some tabletop RPGs based on Stray Kids stuff, you should fill that out. That counts as an advertisement that I just did, and the advertisement on Twitch is now over. So I succeeded at advertising.
찬이 형 그거 절대 모를 걸?
아 본인은 몰라.
몰라. 아 그냥 박혀 있는 거야 머리에.
근데 그런 게 어떻게 보면은 이제 멤버들 뒤에서 챙기고 그럴
맞아,
배려나
맞아.
양보겠지.
그러니까 우리가 막 눈에 안 보이면 막 걱정돼가지고.
그렇지.
그런 게 아닐까.
앞에 있으면
God,
뒤가 안 보이잖아.
I
그걸 얼마나 걱정돼.
뒤에
need
막
him to feel less stress.
한 명만 걸어간다고 생각해. 막 찬이 형 성격에 막 이게 뭐 하고 있지? 이럴 것 같아.
강박이 아니고 습관. 모르겠어요. 그 괜히 제가 뒤에 있어야 뭔가 편하던데 그냥. 어쨌든 제 시야 안에 애들이 다 보이고 앞에서 가면은 뒤에서 무슨 일이 있는지 모르잖아요. 근데 뒤에 있어야 앞에 있는 무슨 일인지 알 수 있으니까. 이게 막 대놓고 티나게 세지는 않은데 확인은 무조건 하긴 하죠. 사람 많으면 또 안 보이기도 해서 혹시나 해서 이렇게 세게 되는 것 같아요. 그래서 제가 어떻게든 마지막에 가려 하는 것 같아요. 왜냐면 이미 애들 다 갔구나라는, 내가 마지막이니까 다 있겠지, 이거 때문에 항상 뒤에 있으려 하는.
This is, so I think something that's interesting here with this is that they're not really clarifying what his emotional purpose here is. So is he watching them from the back to make sure they're behaving? Is he trying to make sure that they're safe? Is he trying to make sure that does he just feel a compulsion and he doesn't really know why he feels that compulsion? I think that's an interesting question that just doesn't, it might get addressed at some point in the next few minutes, but mostly it hasn't been addressed yet. It's just like, okay, so he is interested, and he wants to be doing this. He wants to keep an eye on them, but why? What's the goal? What's the purpose? And does he even know at this point? Right? Is it just habit at this point? Right? I can understand, when they were teenagers and he's trying to keep an eye on all of it, right? Like both they're behaving and they're all there and they're safe and etc. Is it just habit at this point? Like it says, a habit he formed to feel at ease. Is it just that he hasn't given himself the exposure to letting them be on their own if he's with them? Or is he still looking out for some of those same things? Right?
것 같아요.
난 찬이 형 첫인상 생각하면 뽀글머리에 그 탈색모.
와, 나 뽀글머리 브로콜리 진짜 기억난다.
옛날에? 장난 아니었지.
장난 아니었지.
그냥 뭐 전설의 연습생이었어.
찬이 형의 기분이 그 트레이닝 센터의 분위기였어요.
우리한테는 약간 날씨 같은 개념이었어.
날씨였죠, 날씨.
오늘,
우중충하다.
오늘 흐름이다.
연습생 때 그때는 내가 지금보다 영어를 잘했어. 왜냐면 유학 갔다 온 지 얼마 안 됐을 테니까. 그래서 hey 크리스 어찌고서 좀 영어를 했어. 야 근데 한국이니까 형이라고 불러야지 해가지고
진짜로?
죄송해요 하고 나갔어.
아무도 그 형한테 헤이 크리스를 할 수 있는 사람이 없었어.
난 항상 hey 크리스라고 했어.
넌 고향 사람이야. 아 근데 나
This is a little bit more of that like hierarchical method, right? When you're kind of scared. If people are sort of walking on eggshells around you, if you're a little scared, that means that we are getting a little bit more into, that hierarchical, more control-oriented, more trying to instill compliance over trying to instill effectiveness method of leadership. Now, at that point, Chan was in a really weird spot because he really wasn't technically a leader, but he had a lot of social power in that he was sort of an implicit leader. They're talking about sort of this like quote unquote cultural leadership that he had, where he had a lot of influence whether he wanted it or not. And he tried to act the way that he believed one should act with that type of social influence in the context he was in, especially having been like a very, as he said before, having been a much more sort of like cold personality.
되게 많이 이뻐했었어.
아 근데 이현이 진짜 많이 챙겼지.
진짜 많이 챙겨줬어.
이제 남편
And the
시작되고
parentification, we've talked about that before.
얘랑 나랑 우리 그때는 진짜 무서웠어.
그땐 진짜 무서웠어.
지금은 좀 유해졌지.
좀 더 약간 레이백이라고 해야 되나?
찬영도 그때 생각해보면 나이가 지금 우리 나이 아니냐?
아, 20살이었어.
찬이 애기였네.
Wasn't he as old as we are now? God, Hyunjin is so bad at time. Just truly exceptionally bad at time. Please find that evaluation for him. I just like, come on, please. Yeah, so we have a little bit of the like Felix got a little bit of
거기 나갔어.
아무도 그 형한테 헤이 크리스를 할 수 있는 사람이 없었어.
난 항상 헤이크리스라고 했어.
그럼 고향 사람.
yeah, so like Felix got a little bit of the hometown bump, but I also have a feeling that some of that was maybe a little bit of empathy of being from a different place, maybe a little bit of you know, Chan wanting a friend who understood him in a way that he hadn't been understood in a long time. It could also be him recognizing that like this kid does not know what the cultural expectations are, and like correcting him at this point seems silly. Like there could be a number of reasons why Felix gets that little bit of preference, you know. We also don't really get a sense of time, right? Han says that he once went up to him and was like, "Hey, Chris," and he was like, "You should call me Hyung." But Chris knew Han for like a couple of years before he knew Felix, right? So we don't have a great sense in this conversation of the timeline that they are actually referring to. Like, are they referring to right before the survival show, right? Because, I mean, Lino, Seungmin, Felix were there for quite little time before the survival show, right? I think Lino was like, what, 1 month, 2 months? Seungmin was like 3 months. Felix was like 4 months. Versus Han, who had known Chan for like a while. So is Han's like, "Hey, Chris," was that from 2 years before the survival show, or was that from 2 months before the survival show? And this is just like a little bit of remembering that while these people are all very close with each other, they are all still unreliable narrators, because we are... It's not just because, like, them as humans might be an unreliable narrator, it's also because the context we're being given might be unreliable in how it portrays what they're talking about, right? The way the edit is done, the way the subtitles are done, things like that. So, we bring up that anecdote a lot of the, like, Han versus Felix, but I also think it's not as meaningful of an anecdote as we sometimes make it seem, because we do not have, like, a lot of the information and data. And yeah, I think you're right, Lauren, that I think it is because he was saying he was coming from Malaysia and his English was better. So, like, that would have been pretty early on. So, you know, things like that.
아 근데 나 되게 많이 이뻐했었어.
아 근데 이현이 진짜 잘생겼지.
Yeah, and then talking about, so you know, Chan in the interview where he's talking about like why he chose the members, he's talked a little bit about really wanting to mentor IN and like seeing IN in the not interview, fucking audition that IN sent in, and like wanting to be a mentor for this kid for whatever reason. We've talked, like I said, about Channy's parentification before, and I am curious about what it provided him to try to take care of these young people, these people who were quite a bit younger than him, but also who were auditioning and coming in at similar ages that he was auditioning and coming in. I am curious if there was a attempt at healing his own like traumas that he experienced, that he was hoping to do, that he was hoping to be a mentor who could be supportive in a way that maybe he wanted to be supported. That is all super speculation, but again, he's talked about having felt really cold and trying not to get close to people. And we do see him like really taking care of IN. We also know that, you know, there were several years that he was close with Han and Changbin, or at least a couple of years. And so, you know, I'm really curious about like that push and pull inside of him at that time, and that ambivalence being when you have two emotions that might feel contradictory happening at the same time. A lot of people confuse ambivalence and apathy, which is why I'm just clarifying what I mean by ambivalence. The ambivalence of those two experiences, or those two desires, both that desire to avoid and not get attached, but also that desire to caretake and mentor and support. And, you know, what that experience was like for him. I'm very, very curious about that.
진짜 많이 챙겨줬어.
이제 남프 시작되고 나서라서 좀 많이 유해져. 얘랑 나랑 우리 그때는 진짜 무서웠어.
그땐 진짜 무서웠어.
지금은 좀 유해졌지.
좀 더 약간 레이백이라고 해야 되나?
찬영도 그때 생각해보면 나이가 지금 우리
I find it so interesting, like Han being
레이백이라고 해야 되나?
kind of terrified
유해졌지.
좀
of
더
Chan,
약간 그땐 진짜 무서웠어.
지금은 좀
because like as part of Sriracha, they were also pretty close, and so it makes me wonder like more about Han's experience there. You know, what else existed with that fear? Was that fear based on like consequences, or was it because he really wanted to impress this guy who was older and like sort of difficult to impress? Like, what was that terror actually based in? Was it a more sort of like aggressive leadership style? Was it just people who didn't yet feel competent wanting to prove competency to someone they saw as super competent? Like, there are lots of layers to what fear can mean in this context, and I think it's really interesting to have that dynamic of people becoming very close while also being sort of afraid of each other, right? Lauren says, and I think I agree, getting the vibe that he wanted to protect IN from what he went through. I think that does feel very Chan. I would not be surprised to find out that he tried to do mentorship for a lot of people to be a protective factor. And in fact, this is the situation that a lot of leaders get into, where like how they became leaders. And he was a trainee for a few years before Sriracha came together. So, or are you talking about Han or Chan? Yeah, I don't know how long Han was a trainee before Sriracha came together. I think it was only, I don't think it was like super long, but I need to double check. I'll check Tyler's timelines. I'll hit up Tyler. This is the problem with doing like on the spot reactions. I'm pretty sure that Sriracha had started to come together by the time Hyunjin because Hyunjin started a little later than Han, I think. I need to get my timelines in order. I'm not 100% certain. yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, Chan, like, you think about his, like, I'm gonna protect everyone, which is not possible. But a lot of leaders get themselves into leadership positions because they want to be a protective force, and then they get put into a conflict of interest position, where they feel like they have to both be a protective force, but now they're also being asked to, you know, inflict things or require things or mandate things that maybe they don't feel in alignment in, and it creates a really terrible impasse in their souls. I do not envy line managers at all. I think of the people I knew when I was working in corporate, when I was doing leadership training, the people I knew who tended to be the most stressed, the most afraid, the most uncertain, the most scared, a lot of them were line managers, right? They were the direct managers of the teams doing the work because they didn't actually have a ton of power to make change. They did, however, have power over their employees' entire livelihoods. They had to protect that in some ways. They also were required to mandate certain things at certain times that maybe they did or didn't agree with. And what they really wanted was to just like let their teams do great work. And a lot of times they were put in the position of making it harder for their teams to do great work. This is also something that I would experience a lot as a program manager. And I had to work a lot around and like a scrum master and an agile coach and stuff. I had to work a lot around, like, I mean, frankly, I did a lot of shit I was told explicitly not to do because I thought it was a bad rule that was going to make my teams not trust me anymore. And that worked out pretty well for me. But it's a difficult place, but it's very common that they get into those positions because they have this like instinct to take care of and protect the people around them. And so, you know, they're the ones who are skipping their managers to talk to somebody who actually has power. They're the ones who are speaking up. They're the ones who are like trying to coach and mentor. And somebody sees that and they go, oh, you're a great leader. So now we're going to make you a formal leader. But with that is going to come a whole bunch of things that like maybe you're not actually prepared for. And this is why I've also seen a lot of line managers who become line managers because they are exceptional people managers in many ways. And then they decide to go back to being individual contributors because being a line manager fucking sucks. Yeah.
우리 그때는 진짜 무서웠어.
그땐 진짜 무서웠어.
지금은 좀 유해졌지.
좀 더 약간 레이백이라고 해야 되나?
찬영도 그때 생각해보면 나이가 지금 우리 나이 아니냐?
Okay, so Han was a trainee for 3 years, but how long was Sriracha together before the survival show is, I think, the question. Because, I know it wasn't 3 years. I just don't know how long it was. I don't remember. Was it only like a year or so? I really don't remember. I need Tyler's spreadsheet.
아, 20살이었어.
찬이 애기였네.
오, 베이비 챈.
아 찬이.
야, 그 나이 때는 다 그렇게 멋져 보이고 싶고 그런 거야.
알지. 아유 찬이.
조금의 바람이 있다면 뭐 그치 형은 옛날에 비해 많이 변했지, 많이 내려놨지 이 얘기는 나올 것 같기는 한데 안 나오면 제가 더 열심히 해야 된다는 거고
Oh.
지금은 안 무서워할걸요? 아마도? 빨리 나왔으면 좋겠다. 너무 궁금해.
Oh, honey. Honey. Baby girl, come on now. I do think they'll say something like that. And this is actually really funny to me because we come back to Felix, who kind of did say that, like, Chan is less uptight, but, like, remember their Two Kids room where Felix was like, yeah, I don't think he's changed at all. And we're like, baby, even you agreed that he changed. Like, just a year before, you were like, yeah, he's different now. And Chan is having this existential crisis over, like, I hope they think I've changed. And Felix just can't make up his mind. Is Chan the same person he's always been or not? Baby, this is why Felix is one of the more unreliable narrators of other people to me, is because I don't he's gonna say a different thing on a different day all the time. But like, look at this poor boy.
알지. 아유 찬이.
God,
조금의
absolute
바람이
child.
있다면 뭐 그치 형은 옛날에 비해 많이 변했지, 많이 내려놨지 이 얘기.
He holds so much shame and guilt that he just doesn't need to hold, right? Like, you can see the shame from how he was when he was a child. Right? He was 18, 19, 20. He was a child. Let's see. A survival show started in 2017. Yeah, he was a kid. He was a kid. So, but you can see how much he hopes that he's not that person anymore, right? Like how little he trusts himself, that like his perception of himself is accurate, right? Like, I can tell you very, 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 very clearly that I am very different from who I was, 10 years ago. There are some ways in which I am similar, but in many ways I'm very different than I was 10 years ago. There are things that I did 10 years ago that I really, really wish I hadn't done, right? That they were not things I am proud of. They are things I regret. But like holding on to that wouldn't help me, but he's still really attached to the shame of who he was. And part of that is because he has so little confidence in who he is now, right? The fact that he isn't confident about it. And some people would say that's a good thing because it means that you continue to like hear feedback. But we can both feel a sense of confidence in who we are now and a sense of trust of our own perspective of reality, while acknowledging that other people have their perspectives of reality, and they might give us feedback we don't expect that we might have to incorporate into our worldview. We can hold all of these truths. We don't have to be undermining ourselves and our trust in ourselves just because it is possible that other people are going to have slightly different realities from ours, and we might have to reconcile them at some point. Right.
나올 것 같기는 한데 안 나오면 제가 더 열심히 해야 된다는 거고 지금은 안 무서워할걸요.
Right. And it's even that if they don't say that, it means I have to do better. And again, we can know that we have values that we want to live by and we want to be that type of person. But that as a focus of like, this is a situation in which I would have to do better, is still it's not that we're necessarily, it's not that it's necessarily inaccurate per se, but it's the way that it's being a focus, and the way that he's questioning it so much. He's doing this like stress stimming thing, you know? I just need baby to, I don't know, believe in himself more. And like, I understand why he does. Please, honey.
어떻게 못 얘기할지 몰라서.
이제는 옛날만큼 어렵지 않다.
이제는 뭐 대처하는 방법도 알고
이제 예민했을 때 대처법은 그냥
내두는 거. 냅두는 거.
Chan is one of those people who it is going to take him time and much more therapy than he has actually gotten. Which is not to say he hasn't gotten therapy. Like, I think he probably has. I know that there are therapists that JYPE contracts to on occasion. I know that it's as I've said before, I do think that it's very likely that Han at least has gone to therapy. But the amount of therapy, the amount of trauma that he has embedded in himself, the amount of like control issues, the amount of self-shame, like that's a lot of work. That takes a lot of time, and he's one of those people who he is going to spend quite a bit of time being harder on himself than anybody else is going to be, right? Because he is still so merged with this younger version of himself who he really wishes who did things that he wouldn't do as he is now, or who acted in ways that he wouldn't act now. And he's so unwilling to acknowledge that that's not the version of him, like to unenmesh himself with that version of him, of himself and that idea of himself, that everybody around him is going to be, this sort of like, meanwhile they're joking, is like, they love him, and that's going to be very easy for them to love him, and he's going to see himself as more difficult to love than anyone else is going to see him as difficult to love. And this is so common for people with complex like trauma, and so common for people with control issues. Like it just, that people around them are going to see them as much easier than they see themselves. Didn't Chan make a call out to his therapist being at one of the US concerts? I have no recollection of that. I feel like if that had happened, people would have told me, which isn't necessarily true, but I definitely was not informed about that if that happened. I know that they've made shout outs to vocal coaches. I know they've made shout outs to family. I have not heard anything about him making a shout out to a therapist, which doesn't mean he didn't. I just that would be news to me if he did.
냅두면 돼요.
냅두고 방생시켜 놓으면은 알아서 풀려서 와요.
Then he'll
Yeah.
get better, come back to. Just give him a pat on the head like he's a dog.
이제 예민했을 때 대처법은 그냥
내두는 거. 냅두는 거.
냅두면 돼요.
냅두고 방생시켜 놓으면은 알아서 풀려서 와요.
그냥 하고
그냥 흥분이 가라앉으면 알아서 무한해해요.
아 내가 왜 그랬지?
알아서 이제 약간 무한해해.
근데 그런 예민함이 팀적으로 봤을 때 좋은 점도 있었고,
그래,
그거는 모든
그것도
게 예민하잖아. 귀도 예민하니까 이제 음정 하나하나 다 체크할 수
아
있고.
그건 좋아.
춤을 너무 잘하지.
춤도 너무 잘하고 믹스도 너무 잘하고 음정 다.
Okay, there's a lot there. Let's back up a little bit. First, the let them calm down and then they'll feel bad about it thing. That can work. I don't know that it's always what I would recommend. I don't know enough about the situations they're referring to for me to really say one way or another, but listen, it's good to allow people if they are like if they are like really overwhelmed and saying they need some space and they need some time and they need some whatever, then you back off, you let them come back. But sometimes they'll calm down, it'll be fine thing, while it is true, can sometimes it's not the best thing to let people in that situation be in their own heads. Right? Because the reason they become ashamed is that they enter into a shame spiral. And shame spiraling is not good in the long term. It's not people calming down, it's people becoming dysregulated in a different way. It's people adjusting their dysregulation to be what they consider to be more socially acceptable. And what that means is that they don't actually necessarily learn how to deal with whatever it was that made them behave in that way, right? They don't actually learn to deal with their emotions. They instead just redirect whatever frustration or anxiety or anger or whatever, they just redirect that onto themselves. So sometimes the better thing, thank you for posting the link. I will take a look at that once you post it. Sometimes the better thing is to, if they need to walk away for a moment, let them walk away for a moment, but instead sort of being with them there and going through like, hey, what's up right now? Like, how are you feeling right now? And like trying to actually like talk through that issue and talk through like, how are you feeling? What are you thinking? And trying to move away from that shame spiral. Because someone coming out being like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. That was so awful of me. I feel really bad. I shouldn't act like that. Like, that's not helpful really to anyone. It can, an apology is helpful, but like a more useful apology involves like, okay, I understand like what resulted in me reacting that way. And so here's what I'm going to try to not react like that again in the future, which is difficult work if you get stuck in a shame spiral first. We really, really don't want to leave people alone to get stuck in a shame spiral. Like that's really not helpful. And if we hear them, if they make a mistake and we hear them start shame spiraling about it afterwards, when they've like quote unquote calmed down, which again isn't necessarily calming down. Sometimes it's just redirecting the dysregulation into their own minds, onto themselves. If we hear them start to shame spiral, like we really want to help pull them out of that, because it's just not going to help fix much in the longer term. Sometimes people need to just be kind of pissed off and angry and not necessarily take that out on you and not necessarily like, direct it at you, but like be emotional openly and then let it go, rather than feeling like the being openly emotional is the problem, right? The other part of this, okay, so I've brought up, this is sort of interesting.
그건 좋아.
춘을 너무 잘하지.
춤도 너무 잘하고
믹스도 너무 잘해.
음정 박자는 진짜
칼같이 맞춰야 되고.
진짜 칼같이 맞아.
그냥 찬이 형은 디테일 쪽으로 많이 약간 신경 쓰이는 것 같아.
뭔가 완벽을 바랄 때가 있어.
찝고 넘어갈 수 없는 부분들을 형이 잘 찝어주지.
그치, 그런 장점이 있지.
솔직히 말
So what we would refer to this as is somebody who is over-controlled. We sometimes talk about over-control and under-control. This is a common dynamic in like codependent relationships, is one partner who is over controlled and one partner who is under controlled. Chan, and I think I've brought this up before, is very, very over controlled. Some people would read what we just read and think about it in terms of OCD. That is not as likely. Which is not to say that he doesn't have OCD. Like, he's sort of talked about things that do definitely sound like OCD, and he's brought up like having I have an illness or something, I think, in one of the thank you for tagging me, the clip I'm thinking of. And it's just a sound that people edit onto videos from different artists. Let me watch it. Sorry to anyone on stream. I'm trying to watch this TikTok that is supposedly of Chan in New York. But somebody else is... God, I fucking hate TikTok. I don't have TikTok as an app. And if you want to watch a TikTok when you do not have the app, it's a fucking nightmare. I hate TikTok so much. Just let me watch the fucking thing. God. I might not be able to watch this. It really, really does not want me to watch this not on the app. I don't know why. I don't know if it has to do with like the URL or what, but it is actively antagonistic. Oh, here we go. Yeah, that's not Chan. That is not Chan's voice.
Music has a way of finding you.
Yeah, I think that that's just a sound. If there is another video of the same thing, one of the comments asks, "Is this real?" But I can't read the rest of the comments because if you look at the comments on the video, the creator says they edited the video. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So the joy of always of short form media is people spreading misinformation and making it seem like it's not. We love that. But now we know. I guess it was Harry Styles or something. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, so over-controlled, under-controlled. Channy is very over-controlled. This does not seem OCD-esque for a few different reasons. One, OCD tends to impact every part of people's lives, and it's not usually in a way of like, well, my OCD is really helpful at work and really not helpful everywhere else, right? OCD does not tend to have like logical, reasonable, highly effective rituals that work great much of the time for your workplace and create perfectionism. That's not to say that OCD and perfectionism aren't related, but the perfectionism, first of all, doesn't tend to be related necessarily to perfectionism itself, and it's not necessarily like a rational perfectionism. So let's take contamination related OCD. Very, very common, right? So, one of the most common like OCD rituals that we'll see is obsessive compulsive hand washing. Now, the way OCD works is that people have either obsessive compulsive behaviors or obsessive compulsive thoughts based mostly on the fear that if they don't engage in those behaviors or thoughts, that something bad will happen. And it's very often not a particularly rational bad thing. And very often people who are OCD are aware that it is not particularly rational or realistic, right? Very often OCD folks, like, it's not shocking to them to learn that washing their hands for 10 minutes straight is not actually going to better prevent illness than washing their hands for 30 seconds, right? It doesn't tend to be like shocking, and those are a little bit extreme, but we see more things like that, things that maybe help certain things but are more extreme than necessary. So let's say, for instance, hoarding. That's a pretty common obsessive compulsive behavior, right? Like, what if I end up needing something and I don't have it? And those people are going to be able very often to say, like, no, I probably am not going to need newspapers from 10 years ago. But it actively distresses me to get rid of them because what if I'm wrong? But like, my brain is telling me that if I get rid of them, then usually there's some type of more core fear. Maybe it's like apocalypse isn't a fully uncommon one, right? Or some type of natural disaster. What if I end up needing these as kindling for fire, right? And very often they're going to be able to, if asked, say, like, yes, I understand that that's not very likely, but I have to. So it is less likely to see something like OCD result in like actual logistical, logical, detail-oriented perfectionism for what you are actually trying to do and be effective. That perfectionism is going to be related to something else in our over-controlled sector, which again doesn't preclude OCD, right? OCD does have a lot of over-control in it. That is much of the disorder, but it's going to be more or something else than that. There's an ad going on Twitch, which means, I'm supposed to advertise myself. What am I advertising? I already advertised the tabletop RPG. If you want to right, I have a Discord server. You should join it. It's on my profiles and my videos. You don't have to join it, but we're cool. We're pretty cool. I think we're pretty cool. I am so bad at this. I'm really bad at this. What are the other things I'm supposed to advertise about myself? That you should... The Discord, you see, Potato agrees. The Discord is so fucking cool. We have a potato on the Discord. Why don't we have any potato emojis or GIFs? If you join the Discord, you have full power to make your own emojis and pin things. I give broad power to my discordians, my little moonlights. So we have some really unhinged pins. I'm also just like collecting all my favorite fanfic authors, mostly by accident. Yeah, you can all do the emojis. Anyone can set up the emojis. Also everybody can set up stickers. I was not the first person to make my face into an emoji. That's also a thing, is that we have my face as emojis. My community's back. I can stop advertising myself. I'm really bad at this. Right, so there are other things that can result in over-control and perfectionism. Perfectionism itself is often very anxiety-oriented. We've got a billion anxiety disorders that can result in perfectionism. And perfectionism usually is related to something diagnosable, right? Perfectionism, really not good for any of us. Perfectionism is usually a product of malignant capitalism, or the myth of meritocracy. That's what I've found, is that, like, if you really dig into core beliefs around perfectionism, it tends to have a lot to do with the idea that being a good person involves either working way too hard, or being way too competent at something, or being really skilled at being a capitalist. Perfectionism is not just like a... I have not come across somebody who has a healthy hyper-perfectionism, right? Being detail-oriented, sure. But perfectionism tends to destroy people. Usually related to something in our, right, like usually has relationship to over-controlled nature, but sometimes has relationship to people who are very under-controlled, and that sometimes people become very under-controlled because they have these perfectionistic desires, but they feel like they can't meet them. Do you need Nitro? You do not need Nitro to make emojis on my Discord server. I have no idea how to do that. I don't know what you were referring to in that. You're referring to Discord emojis? Ask the Discord, they'll tell you. You can tag a moderator. That's fine. My phone fell on the floor. So sometimes what will happen is people who are under-controlled, and there are under control is something we talk about less than over control, and I feel like it's less intuitive to a lot of people. But like, so like borderline personality disorder is considered like an under controlled disorder, right? Like people who really, really struggle to control themselves or control situations, who feel very out of control, or who are, not as skilled in like immediate problem solving, or who tend towards certain types of emotional dysregulation, or who struggle with independence, right? That's going to be on our more under controlled side. Sometimes people will have this deep sense of perfectionism, but they simply don't believe that they will ever be able to be perfect or engage with that perfectionism. So they'll lean more towards under-controlled nature and simply give up trying because they don't believe they can do it. And so like that can be another direction that things go. But generally, I don't see... Sometimes people who are very perfectionist, right? People who are very over-controlled, they can be very, very, very competent at work. And they really, really struggle with social interactions. So this is also very common for what we refer to as obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, which is a probably actually fairly common personality disorder that we do not talk about enough. It's not well understood, it's not well studied, but it does seem to be more common than many other types of personality disorders. The thing is with obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is again different from obsessive compulsive disorder, just like schizotypal personality disorder is very different from like schizophrenia. It's important not to get these things like too confused with each other, even though they have very similar words. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder. First of all, people are less, well, first of all, a lot of times it makes people very competent workers, which means that they don't identify that there is something wrong, because a lot of our mental health system globally, not just Western, right? Like globally, a lot of our mental health system is based on, are you able to work? Are you able to do a job? Are you able to engage in capitalism? And when you stop being able to do that, or when you're not able to do it as effectively, people are more likely to get like referrals to services or engage in services or things like that, because now like livelihoods are at stake, you know? But when you're very good at your job, or you're very good at being a student, then a lot of people don't think about it's sort of it's very similar to like how a lot of people don't necessarily get diagnosed with like autism or ADHD when they're young because they're not like disruptive in class, you know? So if you are engaging in the systems that they have determined are useful normative systems, you don't really get as much, it's not as likely that you see the cracks. So what will happen for people who are OCPD is that they will be exceptional workers, very detail oriented, very like hyper vigilant about every single thing, very over controlled, and they will really struggle with social relationships. That doesn't mean they're trying to be controlling of social relationships in the way we might normally consider it. I've seen people who, you know, maybe they are like huge micromanagers, or maybe they are like really lashing out at people, or maybe they are, you know, things like that. Possible. But really what OCPD is more about is this very rigid sense of what you're supposed to do, what the right thing to do is, and the right way to do it. That there is a perfectionism based on this mentality of the correct method. And what they will get frustrated at is if people are not engaging in the correct method. So for instance, I've seen a few people who they believe that the correct way to work is very collaboratively. That you should be communicating everything you do, that you should be collaborating constantly, that like people should be like in very rigorous communication, and they get really frustrated when people aren't doing that. So they don't consider themselves over-controlled because they want to be working with other people. They want collaboration. They want feedback. But they are very rigid, actually, about this idea that you should be giving feedback all the time. That we need to be in this constant communication. And if somebody else works in a way that like feedback is more periodic, or doesn't think it needs to be as collaborative or as communicative, right? Like they just function in a slightly different way than that, then those people will get very frustrated, right? So it's still a method of over control because it's about the rigidity of thinking. Because with something like OCPD, or, you know, some anxiety disorders, or some, right, like there's a few different things that can result in this type of deep over control, or deep perfectionism, or both. Because it is based on like a rule set that feels very logical, a lot of times folks have a much harder time recognizing where they are being unrealistic or where they are being overly rigid. It's not like OCD per se, where the rituals are very clearly like not in alignment with how reality works. It feels very, very much like how reality works and how reality should work, right? This is creating sets of rules and understandings of how reality should work and really trying to implement them. So yeah, there's a lot of things they can be very, very good at, but then socially they have a really hard time understanding where they're struggling and why they're struggling. And like why they're having a hard time connecting to people and why people don't seem to do things correctly, right? Like it seems very straightforward. You just do this and this and this, and this is the right way to do things. And you should be sensitive to tone. And you know, as they're saying, like Chan is very sensitive to like key and tone and things like that. Like technically, you know, you should be sensitive to those things because that's your job. And you should be, organizing things into very understandable folder systems because that's your job and that's how it works, and it makes it easier for other people and it makes it faster for you, and etc., 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 etc. And so you create all of these sets of rules that are very rigid and require engaging in all of them, and it's very stressful. And eventually people burn out, or they lose community, or they push away too many people, or they have a lot of shallow connections because they want community, they love people, but it's so hard for them to feel vulnerable with their wants and their shoulds and things like that. And, you know, they are desperate for affection and for love, but it's just too difficult for them to get close to people. And it can be, you know, whether it is that they burn out or whether it is that they just spend their lives very stressed or very ashamed or very confused. It can be really hard. So, you know, yes, there are pros to being over-controlled, but those pros are things that you can build skills to continue to do without staying that over-controlled and that hyper-vigilant. So that is my big rant about that. Remember that there's lots of things that can cause some of these issues. So just because I'm talking about one diagnosis doesn't necessarily mean that that's your diagnosis. Always do other research. But if you're hearing something and you're like, that feels really relatable, and I'm talking about something like over control, which is the more overarching concept, looking up over control and what over control might look like, that might be helpful, right? So instead of going like, well, maybe I have OCPD, that's an example of something that I'm talking about that is related to over control. Maybe looking up over control and, you know, looking at some anxiety disorders or some personality disorders and seeing if any of those feel relatable. But, you know, there are, listen, autism and OCPD can look very similar in some ways. Also commonly co-occurring. So it's complicated, you know.
그래서 고치고 싶었던 부분들은 고쳐지지 않았고요. 그래서 노력하고 있기는 한데 마음대로 잘 안 되는
Yeah,
것 같아요.
personal growth is hard, baby.
멤버들이
It takes
확실히
time.
어떻게 이 사람을 이해해야 하는지 그거는 다 캐치를 한 것 같아요. 캐치하고
Members know.
뭔가 이 형을 어떻게든 이해해보자 하는 게 노력하는 게 보여서 더 미안해요.
I bet that there's a lot more people who understand this too than just your members. There's more people who, I'm sure there were more people who like really love him and would love for him to open up than just like, those people.
내 또 너무 예민했구나. 아이 이러면서 이제 후회하죠. 좀 유치할 수도 있고 좀 오글거릴 수도 있지만 제 인생이 멤버들 기반으로 돼 있어요. 그래서 저한테 제일 소중한 거, 제일 사랑을 받고 싶어 하는 게 멤버들이다 보니 굳이 더 마찰을 만들고 싶지 않은 것 같아요.
같이 살면 포기를 한 게 되게 많아요.
I understand why he loves his members so much. I totally do, right? Like, he sees them as his saviors, and he has not gotten to a point of self-acceptance yet to recognize that he saved himself as much as his members saved him, right? Like, he wouldn't be able to feel like these people saved his life if he hadn't allowed them to, right? But that's like a point of self-acceptance that like takes time. And, you know, these people are very dear to him. He does have a hard time opening up and being super vulnerable. He, you know, has a hard time feeling known and feeling loved despite the things that he struggles with himself and dislikes about himself. I wish he could love himself even close to as much as he loves his members. Because it's such a devastating way to live, to love the people around you so much more than you're willing to love yourself, and to believe that these people whom you love so much have a hard time with you, right? Again, like, it's so clear that like people really care for and appreciate Chris, but he sees himself as so much more difficult than probably a lot of other people see him as. Which isn't to say he doesn't have difficult parts of himself, but that's because we all do. We all have things that like people struggle with. We all have things that even our deepest, fondest loved ones struggle with, right? Conflict is part of being human. It's part of it's part of vulnerability. It's part of love. You know, we love each other more when we allow for conflict. And I think one of the things that Chan probably struggles with the most as a leader is conflict, is the fact that conflict is going to happen, and he is going to be in conflict himself, but he doesn't want it. Even though it's so important and so valuable, and going to happen, I would bet that that's something that he often struggles with, is that push and pull between, I don't want any conflict, I want to let them do what they want to do, also I need this to happen and I need this to happen, and if this doesn't happen, then it's going to be dangerous. And, you know, like, that's a difficult push and pull to be in, especially if you can't find trust in yourself for like, okay, I can be a servant leader while still ensuring safety, right? Like, I can make both of these things be true. I can ensure quality and allow for opinions, right? Getting emotional about this just because like he is so I think it is really upsetting to me to see someone who believes so much that he's so difficult when everyone around him really doesn't think that way. And maybe it's just because I've seen that so much. I've been in that place myself, like, and it's such a common phenomena. And I just wish that people spent the time understanding that like people love them as much as they love other people. and that they deserve to feel that love for themselves too, right?
형이 정리 같은 면에서도 그렇고 이거 썼으면 그대로 갖다 놔? 아니면 이거 쓰레기는 이쪽에다 모아놔? 이러면 안 하거든요. 뭐라고 하면 이제 애들이 불편할까 봐 그런 거에 대해서 되게 눈치 보긴 해요.
그러니까 그 형 입장에서는 불편하고 그런 상황들이 정말 많을 거예요. 왜냐면 진짜 완벽주의자고 되게 깐깐하고 되게 그런 거에서 되게 민감한 사람인데 꾹꾹 참다가 얘기하게 되죠. 내가 이런 얘기하면 괜히 불편할까 봐. 그런 약간 그런 스타일이.
And some people would think that this might be good exposure therapy. This is terrible exposure therapy. This would probably actually make, you know, if whether there's OCD or OCPD or, you know, any type of compulsivity or phobias or anything like that, this would probably make it much worse because you're not exposing yourself at a reasonable level of distress and then going back to a comfort zone. You're just getting to a level of distress and like not dealing with it. And so it just becomes more and more repressed. This would not be effective, whether it's, you know, exposure response prevention, ERP, or whether it's prolonged exposure therapy. It would be really ineffective for both of those. And probably wouldn't necessarily make the problem worse, but would not probably make it a ton better either. Like maybe little parts here and there might get a little bit easier, but you know, I think knowing what we know about how he and IN lives and what his house is like now and how he functions in hotels now and things like that, it does not seem like this was effective exposure therapy, because it wasn't exposure therapy. So I think a lot of people, they see something, they think about like exposure therapy and they know very little about it, and so they think like, oh, I can just like push my way through this by just like forcing myself to be uncomfortable all the time and I'll get used to it, and that's not how it works. It's really not how it works.
취미가 뭐야? 학습 포기요.
형 취미 뭐야? 찬이 형 취미? 애니 보기, PT, 휴대폰 게임 하기.
찬영이 핸드폰 게임을 진짜 많이 해.
게임을 소개를 해줬는데 그렇게 행복한 모습은 오랜만에 본 것 같아.
누가 더 잘해? 너랑?
근데 잘하는 게 없어.
Do you think that that's
메이플 스토리 같은
약간
거?
RPG.
Do you think that
게임 잘하는 편이 아니라서.
근데 그걸로
is that when Chan learned about Genshin? Is 2024 when Chan became obsessed with Genshin? I don't know enough about the Genshin timeline, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was the Genshin timeline. Watching anime, working out, playing mobile games. Okay, what would he give up first? Hobbies, learning, rest. I don't remember 2024 Chan enough to know if that... I think at this point in his life, he would not give up rest first, but I don't remember 2024 Chan enough to remember if he would give up rest first.
학습 포기요.
형 취미 뭐야? 찬이 형 취미? 애니 보기, PT, 휴대폰 게임 하기.
찬영이 핸드폰 게임을 진짜 많이 해.
게임을 소개를 해줬는데 그렇게 행복한 모습은 오랜만에 본 것 같아.
누가 더 잘해? 너랑?
근데 잘하는 게 없어.
약간 메이플 스토리 같은
약간
거?
RPG.
맞아, 그래도 게임을 잘하는 편이 아니라서.
근데 그걸로 인해서 그 찬이 형의 화가 좀 잘 다스려지는 편인 것 같아.
Yeah.
그러면 1, 2, 3
But that doesn't mean he understands that the self-care is important.
이미 학습 완료.
학습, 휴식,
I think he wants to continue learning. I think he doesn't see... I think learning is something that he probably sees as like inherent necessity.
진짜 모르겠어요.
I might be wrong though. He's a tough one.
순서인 것 같은데? 취미, 학습, 휴식. 한 번밖에 사는 인생인데 그 한계를 계속 넘고 싶어 하다 보니 계속 학습하고 싶은 것 같고.
Yeah.
취미는 뭐 어쨌든 제가
Yeah, that makes sense.
음악이거나 이런 거.
Okay, so he's not giving up rest first. He 2024 Chan understands the importance of that. he does not understand the importance of self-care and the fact that he would not be able to continue doing work if he gave up all of his hobbies. He is prioritizing his job to absolutely nobody's surprise.
그거는 계속하면 좋지. 잘하진 않아요. 그거 진짜 잠깐 빠져가지고 시작하다가 없어졌어요 그거. 우리 제가 약간 되게 그 미래적인 걸 되게 좋아하는 것 같아요. 약간 현대 미래 그런 걸.
It's pretty common for people
이제 이해가
immersed
이제
in escapism.
살게 되는데 거실을 어떻게 약간 이쁘게 꾸밀지 되게 고민하고 있을 것 같아요. 일단 제일 좋은 막 조명 한 번에 다 색깔 막 이런 거 다 변화할 수 있는 약간 그런
Oh,
거
God.
다 찾고 있고
That's
스피커도 있고 공기청정기랑 그것도 기계잖아요. 가습기, 로봇 청소기 한번 맞다. 로봇 청소기 왜 생각 안 해봤지? 그것도 사야 되겠다.
야, 그 인간이 집안에서 드론 날려가지고 기억나냐?
우리 다 같이 살 때?
기계 진짜 잘 다루고. 맞아요. 그거 어떻게 다 다루는지 모르겠네.
맞아.
이상해.
다 고치고 컴퓨터랑 막 이런 것도 잘 다루고.
근데 그 형 진짜 반가이고요.
맞아,
못
잘해.
고치는 기계가 없어.
맞아. 그 형 진짜 잘 고쳐 그런 거.
고장난 걸 떠나서 그냥 다 요청해요.
형 근데 진짜 할 줄 우리 창빈 형은 진짜 할 줄 아는 게 하나도 없어요.
운동밖에 없어요. 저 그냥 다 요청합니다. 찬영한테.
아 큐베이스 같은 거에 약간 안 되면은 형한테 연락해가지고 형 이거 왜 안 돼요 이러면은 페이스타임 딱 한 다음에 그거 형이 다 알려주면
yeah,
되고.
that tracks.
연습실에 있는 스피커 같은 것도 이제 맥북이랑 이 TV랑 연결하는
Machines and software have rules, right? Even when they're hard to work out, they have rules. And those rules are fairly consistent, right? I mean, I often say, like, fixing something is... I don't know what you have to turn off and on again, but you have to turn something off and on again. Is it your internet? Is it the password? Is it the stream? Is it the video call? Whatever, maybe. But, like, it's usually something that you just need to turn off and on again, right? There are rules. There are consistencies. There are certainties to machines and to software. Even if it's difficult to fix, it still exists within understandable limitations. And so someone who tends to be very perfectionist and control-oriented can really become attached to things like machines that have these consistencies and the certainty and the stability, because it feels very good to interact with, because you're probably going to be able to figure it out, right? It's a puzzle, you know?
선도 기가 막히게 잘 이렇게 싹싹싹 해요.
Yeah, that tracks.
근데 기계는 근데 그건 있어요. 어쨌든 다 써져 있고 매뉴얼이 있고 그것만 잘 따르면은 쉽지 않나. 그리고 요새
We all know that I love when I say something, and then I am immediately told I am right. My favorite thing.
세상에는 유튜브가 있기 때문에 모든 걸 다 찾아볼 수 있어요.
I hate
그러니까-
learning things on YouTube.
그러니까
It's my least favorite fucking
저한테는
thing.
이분들은 VIP 게스트
I
분들이요,
can't do
VIP
it.
사람들이요. 아, 그럴 수도 있지. 형이 도와줄게. 이거는 이렇게 하는 거야. 특별 대우를.
This is also common among people who tend towards a lot of over control, is that they will, and actually people who are very over controlled will very commonly find themselves attracted to people who are more under controlled or who are less independent, or, things like that, because it feels really good to be valuable and to be able to use that over control for somebody else. This is how a lot of people get into codependent relationships. Codependence, very important to remember, codependence is not enmeshment. Many people use codependence to mean enmeshment, right? They'll say, we're, me and my partner are just like too codependent on each other. And what they really mean is that we're too enmeshed. We live our lives too similarly. We get too sad if we're apart, etc. Codependence, conceptually, comes from the substance use space, right? Specifically, alcoholism. codependence was the term essentially for a relationship in which there is a person who engages in unwanted or difficult behavior and the enabler. So originally it was about, you have somebody who is misusing, overusing alcohol, and somebody who enables them, right? They give them money, or they continue to allow them to push boundaries, or, this person continues to come home drunk and break things, and the other person will say, like, I'm going to have to kick you out if you keep doing that, and they won't do it, right? So you have an enabler and somebody who is engaging in difficult or antisocial or, bad behavior. So what can happen is that somebody who's very over-controlled can get into relationships with people where the over-controlled person can essentially enable the under-controlled person to stay under-controlled so that the over-controlled person can continue to be over-controlled, right? So, I feel good creating certainties. I feel good being a perfectionist. I feel good being in control. So I'm going to find somebody who really struggles with independence, or, doesn't have a lot of community or things like that. And I'm going to take care of their lives. I'm going to take care of them. I'm going to fix them. I'm going to be in charge of making sure that they're okay. And in doing so, I'm going to, either we can frame it as enabling the being under controlled, or we can refer to it as sort of disabling their opportunities to be more independent. This can become abusive on either side, right? This can become abusive from the person who's over-controlled, in that they want the other person to be so reliant on them that they start isolating them from community, that they, start undermining attempts at independence, things like that. It can become abusive on the other side, from somebody who maybe starts taking advantage of the person who's over-controlled, and refusing to engage in these things, even if that other person starts to change. That if the person who's over-controlled, maybe a people pleaser, right, starts to try to assert boundaries, the one who's under-controlled might lash out about that. So a codependent relationship can become an abusive relationship pretty easily. That doesn't mean it always is, and often it's sort of like a long-term escalating thing, because again, this is about cycles of behavior. But this is just my way of saying this is very, very common of somebody who's over-controlled, in that they really want to prove out their competency, and so they will take care of the people around them in as many ways as possible, potentially to everybody's detriment.
어떻게든 우리 도련님들께 해드리려 하죠.
똑똑해요 진짜. 근데 스마트해요. 진짜 똑똑하긴 해. 이번에 그거 합주했을 때.
와
우리
그거 진짜
그 안무에 맞는 소스 빠진 것 하나하나 다 체크하고, 악기 하나 틀어지면 그거 듣고 바로 얘기하고.
맞아. 그거 어떻게 다 캐치하냐, 근데 그거.
공부도 진짜 많이 하고.
빈틈이 하나도 없어요.
맞아.
네?
그리고 그냥 칭찬을 아예 못 들어.
No, he wouldn't be able to do that.
그 약간 잘해주면 싫어해요.
Yeah,
근데 또 못해주면
that is how he would feel about that.
그래서 이제 나는 칭찬 안 해주고. 형님
Oh, that does.
이 정도가 제일 좋아.
자기가 고생한 걸 알아준 거야. 그 정도면 되는 거야.
That's not all he needs. I mean, that would be what he's comfortable with, right? And so this almost becomes enabling in some ways, in that we can enable self-deprecation by refusing to make the other person uncomfortable, right? Oh, you worked really hard there, and that's great, but he's not a child. That's the way that you raise a child, you know, that you encourage hard work in a child without making them, you know, feel like they're fundamentally one way or another. And, you know, yes, compliments like, oh, you're so smart, oh, you're so pretty, or whatever, those tend to be pretty subpar compliments, but people who are bad at taking compliments need to be forced to experience compliments. And yes, I understand that I am outing myself here. I understand that I'm going to regret saying that out loud. But like it's important. That is a type of exposure therapy. No, obviously we don't like run up to them and like force them constantly to hear praises about themselves, but you know, it's important for them to hear like, I love and appreciate you because of who you are in this, and this way. When I was, I worked at a summer camp when I was 18, and there was this like manual on like working with coworkers that recommended saying like, I appreciate you. And I really loved that. I like became so attached to that. And I started bringing that into every single workplace where I would start to just say to people like, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate that you did that for me so much. I appreciate, and eventually I would start telling them exactly what I appreciated about them and appreciated like in that moment. And it was really, really, really fucking awkward when I was working in games at tech for a while. But no matter where I went, it eventually would become culture because it felt so good, even for people who did not understand it and were confused by it and felt really awkward when I would be like, I appreciate so much the amount of thought that you put into the like strategies that you set out and the fact that you really think about the way the rest of the team, like what the rest of the team needs in conjunction with building out like the team strategy sense. Like I really appreciate that you think about those things together. Or, you know, I'd say like, I really appreciate that you listen so well to the other people around you and that you very clearly care a lot about making sure they feel listened to. Those things always eventually caught on, right? Like they would always become culture because accepting a compliment is very vulnerable. And giving compliments is very vulnerable. I would even argue that for a lot of people, giving out a compliment feels more vulnerable than giving out like negative feedback. Or even making a request for themselves. Compliments are very vulnerable and they are also really important for us as people. And we can't just give up on giving people, right? Like, yeah, of course Chan takes you worked really hard well. He has a fundamental belief that like work and working hard is the most important thing he can do. And that's the thing that matters. Right? You know, it just reinforces that myth of meritocracy that's like slowly eating away at him. Which isn't to say that it's not valuable to say that, but it is to say that, like, yes, somebody will be amenable to that. No, that does not mean that's all they need, right? People need to feel uncomfortable to grow.
오. 찬이 형.
아,
내가 이번에 얘기 다 끝내. 졸업하자. 감사합니다.
저는 제 자신을 생각하는 걸 잘 못해요. 그게 제 약점인가?
Yeah.
모르겠어요. 제 자신을 인정 못하고 제일 인정받고 싶어하는 사람들은 멤버들인 것 같아요. 멤버들이 저를 인정한다면 저는 그냥 편하게 죽을 수 있을 것 같아요.
And so here's like this inherent contradiction, right? I don't take compliments well. The only thing I want is to have done well by my members, to be appreciated by my members, to be loved by my members, to know that I did well by them, to know that I paid attention to them, to know that I took care of them. But I'm really bad at putting myself first. I feel guilty when I put myself first. I feel guilty if I do things well that aren't about my members. I feel guilty if somebody recognizes me instead of recognizing my members, even if that is my members. So all I want is this love and affection from my members and this validation from my members, but I also feel feelings that do not feel good when I get that validation. It's very common. This is not a Chan exclusive problem. And I would actually bet that a number of these members have this problem. You know, IN is not very good at taking compliments, right? Like I went through all the 2Kids rooms and I'd sit there and I'd figure out who can take a compliment. And the answer usually was like not very many of them. Like Felix sometimes is okay at it. And I think that part of the reason Felix sometimes is okay at it is a combination of probably like the way he interacts with his family, I would bet, but and the way he grew up, but also like the members really, really, really want to compliment Felix. And he's probably just fucking gotten used to it. Right? Like none of them are very good at this. So, you know, it's a very common thing. It's a very common problem. People really, really struggle to allow themselves to be loved and appreciated, mostly because it's all we want. All we want is to be loved and validated authentically. All we want is to be seen. All we want is to be cared for. And it feels like if somebody is starting to do that, if they're getting close to doing that, it's very scary. Because what if you lose it? Or what if you don't have it tomorrow? Or what if it doesn't mean what you think it means? What if this is just a compliment, but it's not actually love and affection? Or what if they're wrong? What if they're complimenting you, but they're just biased and you haven't actually done what you need to do? Or like there's all of these questions that can come up for people because it's you can't mind read. And you just have to trust people when they say they appreciate you. And that's really, really frightening.
것 같아요.
그 약간 표현 같은 거에 있어서 조금 미숙하지 않나?
은은하게 티내는 스타일 같은 면 그 이런 향을 풍긴다랄까요?
좋네요, 형.
뭐 그런
갑자기
바이브,
왜 애니화가 되는 거야?
그런 바이브를 풍겨낸다고 해야 되나요?
아플 때 안 아픈 척 진짜.
아 맞네. 아플 때 안 아픈 척 하는 거 맞네.
그거 아시죠?
그래서 서바이벌 방송 때 넘어졌었어요.
전사의 후회 할 때.
스케이트보드 타다가 얼굴이 아스팔트에 갈렸던 적이 있습니다.
연습실 왔는데 형 왜 그래요? 아 저쪽에서 넘어졌어. 겁나 아파 보이는데 되게 괜찮은 척.
살짝 긁혔어. 살짝 긁힌 정도가 아니거든요.
살짝이라고
It's not just a
표현하는데
scream.
막 와.
This is really common also.
근데 그 형 알아봐줘 이거 되게 좋아해.
알아봐주면 진.
Yeah, he wants to be loved. He wants to be cared for. We all want to be loved and cared for. We're afraid if we ask for it, we won't get it. So we try to communicate it in other ways so that we still get it, but that if nobody notices, it's not because they secretly don't love and care for us, right? Like it's a very, but like, listen, people who like repress all their emotions, they're not as good at hiding them as they think they are. Unless they are extremely depersonalized, very blunted in affect, in which case, very often, if they're not just autistic, right, like, but even then sometimes, like, very often you go like, oh, so you, like, have a lot of emotions that you don't know how to handle, right? Like, people aren't as down low about their emotions as I think they are, you know?
진짜 좋아해.
진짜 좋아해.
그것만큼 행복해하는 거 없어. 목마른 형이야. 그 형 사랑했죠. 목마른 형. 은근 관심 받고 싶어해. 은근
Yeah.
뭐 해달라고 해. 그럼 그거 진짜 행복해.
맞아, 자기를 필요로 하는 거에 대한 행복감을 느껴.
그러니까 리더라는 거예요.
맞아, 진짜 천상이에요.
그거 자체가 진짜 리더라는 거예요.
우리 다 이제 다 무뚝뚝하니까 저희는 약간 그렇게 성장해 온 것 같은데요. 그런 얘기 안 해도 고마운 거 아니까. 아니 그냥 되게 장난식으로 툭 던지긴 하죠. 약간 그냥 애들이 반응이 궁금해서 하는 거긴 한데 릭스한테 영어로 한거 섞어서 하고 창빈이한테도 끊임없이 하고 다 해요. 아무래도 다 싫어하지 않을까요? 다 싫어해요.
부담스러울 정도로 하긴 해.
힘을 쫄 때 난리나.
이제
콘서트에서 예를 들어 그런 표현도 약간 내가 봤을 때 그냥 M이잖아. 자기가 그리고 있는 자기의 그 모습이 있는 거야.
맞아.
이미 자기는 이미 다 극제이잖아. 극제.
맞아.
이미 자기는 여기서 이걸 할 거를 미리 계산을 한 거야.
머릿속에서는 3인칭이야. 저쪽에서 우리의 모습이 보이고 있는 거야. 그 얼마나 멋있고 웅장한 우리의 모습이 보이고 있는 거야. 머릿속에서.
지금 이런 얘기를 들으니까 또 되게 새롭네.
애니메이션을 많이 봐서 그런 것 같아.
맞아.
왜냐면 나도 가끔 그런 상상 하거든. 내가 만약 이런 데에서 이런 걸 한다면.
나 근데 그거 되게 낭만 있다고 생각해.
나도 되게 낭만
난
있다.
낭만이라고 생각. 난 찬이 형은 낭만주의자야 그 형은.
저 형 진짜 낭만이야.
낭만이야. 저 형
진짜
낭만
낭만이야.
진짜 짱이야.
황차는 늑대다.
섹시하네.
좀 섹시한데?
방차는 낭만 캥거루다.
아, 깔끔했다.
자, 방차는
낭만 캥거루.
나는
낭만 캥거루.
찬이는
Oh, I remember this part. Oh god.
찬이는 어려워요.
And I was like,
찬이는
I
한참
really
멀었어요.
need the
더
person on the
열심히
other
해야
side of the screen to be a therapist and not just like a producer. Like this is I'm glad he's opening up, and also like I need him to open up to somebody who will challenge his perception of himself in a way from like a stance of knowing him rather than opening up to a screen that is like this false vulnerability, right? When we open up to a screen, you know, to a huge audience, that audience is going to come in and they're going to be like, oh, we love you, you deserve so much more than this, oh, blah, 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 right? They're going to do the shit that I did. But it's so easy to be like, well, they don't actually know me. They don't know the real me. They don't know how true it is. They don't actually know, right? It's so easy to just be like, well, but that's not meaningful. You open up one-on-one with somebody who knows you and is able to go, well, listen, you did this, and 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 you did this. Here's all the evidence that proves that what you just said is bullshit. And here's like some actually true things about you. And why do you believe those things about you anyway? Like you're saying you're lost. What are you lost in pursuit of, right? What map are you on? What you're saying you're lost. What does that mean? Well, when you open up to somebody who's actually who knows you, knows how to interrogate you, and like really truly has affection for who you really are, that is way scarier than opening up to a camera for a lot of people, you know? So you can sort of fake yourself into believing you're being vulnerable by saying things that are true and scary and emotional to people who you can write off if they push you on them, right? It doesn't matter. Listen, Pangchan's never going to watch this. Thank fuck. But if he did, that probably doesn't matter much to him. You know, that I think that he's clearly grown a lot and has become a really great leader and loves his members, and his members clearly absolutely adore him. And, you know, he's a phenomenal artist who, yes, is a hard worker, but most importantly is incredibly passionate and wants to work with people, right? Like, it doesn't matter to him because I don't know him. Like, he doesn't know me, but I don't know him. I know what he has given me. And it's very easy for us to write off the opinions of people who don't know us well enough to, make us feel like they have valid opinions, which is probably good because, like, fuck it, there's lots of people who say a lot of dumb shit about him. Right? Like, there's a lot of people who say a lot of shit that, like, he shouldn't pay attention to, and unfortunately he does pay attention to it because negative reinforcement is a lot easier to pay attention to than positive reinforcement and, like, etc. But, like, yeah, I don't really want him to pay attention to what people like me say because, like, a lot of people say a lot of the really fucked up shit that's really probably not very true about him. So I hope that he, yes, this was 2 years ago. I'm not sure that his 2 kids' rooms last year convinced me that, like, ton changed in that year, but, like, this was 2 years ago. Who knows where he's at now. I hope that he has since and that he will continue to more open up and say these things directly to people who can help him feel that he can give himself some fundamental qualities of who he is besides lost, complicated. Everyone's complicated. Got a long way to go. Like who can? No, you are doing so good. Who wrote that subtitle? Can he open up to the person who wrote that subtitle in a way that the person who wrote that subtitle can, like, tell him off? Please. Chen doesn't even take care of himself. Yeah. And he keeps saying Pabo. Okay, so there's, like, a little bit, and I'm, so he's, like, what, like, he's a fool who doesn't focus on himself, or, like, he's a fool who only focuses on other, I don't know.
약간 시간 계산을 좀 많이 잘 하긴 해요. 대략 지금에 몇 시 몇 분이겠다 하면은
I can guess the time down to the minutes. Okay. He is not ADHD. I see so many people who say that he is ADHD. Nothing about him gives me ADHD. I've never known an ADHD person who has that positive a relationship with time. And I'm sure that some exist, but, like, ADHD and complex PTSD look so similar, and we already know that he has PTSD, right? Like, he would need to do some serious, like, trauma work before he had a serious ADHD assessment, because that would muddy the results a lot.
그 맞추는 그 재미. 예를 들어 제가 뭐 7시 50분에 씻으러 갔어요. 그럼 나올 때 한 8시 지금 딱 3분이겠다 하면은 뭔가 맞출 때 막 그런 거 있어요.
Yeah, that's like the least ADHD thing I've ever heard someone say. Oh, do I have a policy violation because of the fucking... It's because it's considered... I need to yell at them because this is educational content. It's not supposed to get a policy violation. But it is. Sorry, y'all. Okay, well, I will stop streaming on